Alexandre Pantoja and Joshua Van are fighting this weekend, and it's a really fascinating matchup that the UFC's made in the flyweight division. You've got a really dominant reigning champion who thrives in chaos and is very skillful in all aspects, and you've got a young contender who's only 24 years old and is the number one contender in that division fighting for the title. Today we're going to break down this fight, who wins this fight, and whether Joshua Van can take the title from Alexandre Pantoja. So let's get into it. Now, starting with Joshua Van, he's the definition of young talent that is just exciting to watch. He's young, explosive, confident, he's got absolute aura, he fights with zero hesitation, and is just tearing through the flyweight division with sharp boxing, killer instincts, and has that absolute dog in him, as he displayed that in the fight with Brandon Royval. Some of the things that we notice about Joshua Van is that he's a very talented striker. He has crisp hands, intelligent boxing, good footwork, fast combinations, and solid takedown defense. He's never panicking, and he's always staying calm and composed, and he can always push himself. You know, he's the type of guy you don't want to overlook as an older fighter just because he's younger than you. He's the type of guy that can shock you because of how good he is at a young age. Then you have Alexandre Pantoja. Now, Alexandre Pantoja is someone who is very dominant. He's someone that pushes the pressure on you, makes things uncomfortable, and has a warrior spirit who fights like a dog to the very end and pushes himself to become great. He's someone who's durable, he has a decent amount of power, world-class jiu-jitsu, and knows how to make you uncomfortable and drained. He's someone who is a cardio machine, he outpaces you, he's nasty when it comes to scrambling, has a lot of grappling pressure, and the best way to describe Alexandre Pantoja is that he's like a symbiote. The symbiote latches onto you, and when he latches onto you, he absolutely drains you, and he makes sure that you have no chance of surviving against him. Now the question is, can Joshua Van handle the chaos that Alexandre Pantoja brings? The fight isn't really about skill alone. Yes, there is elements of skill into it, but there's parts of the fight where Joshua Van has to be able to survive what Pantoja brings to him, and that's where skill can't help him. There's certain things that Pantoja does that pushes past skill and just relies on his warrior spirit, his absolute grit and heart and determination. When it comes to taking punches and punishment, Pantoja is an absolute brick to deal with. He has a brick for a head. People can't really defeat that aspect of him. And Van, yes, this can actually be a pro and a con for Pantoja because he does get caught, but we've seen through a lot of his fights that he can survive it, and it does allow Joshua Van to have a chance to get a puncher's chance to land a shot on him because of his better fundamentals and striking, better boxing discipline. Whereas it can also be a weakness because Pantoja doesn't care about striking fundamentals or all of that stuff. He breaks technique, makes things ugly and uncomfortable with absolute pressure to drag you down, latch onto you like a symbiote, and drown you on the floor because that's what he does best in. So knowing that Pantoja does well in this aspect, the path that Joshua Van really has to follow is that make sure that Pantoja can't latch onto you. He really has to be able to keep that management of distance. He has to keep that range away from him, because as soon as that range gets smaller and smaller, Pantoja's chances of grabbing him and getting him onto the ground gets even higher. So the protocol that Joshua Van has to follow in this fight is rely on your striking and distance management. By keeping the distance, yes, there will be instances where Pantoja is trying to grab you and make it ugly. Joshua has to make sure that it's pretty, not ugly. So that means that he has to utilize the jab, keep his range, select shots that he has to plan effectively for, make sure you don't do anything risky, and make sure that you break him down systematically. Make sure that you take away his range, make sure that you dominate the range, and so that you have every control when it comes to the striking, because every fight stands striking. So if you can control the fight from the very start and make sure that it doesn't change from that start, you have a chance of dominating Alexandre Pantoja on the feet. Also, the way Alexandre Pantoja presses you is a bit reckless. He comes at you trying to just bully you and grab onto you, but because of that, his striking defense isn't really there. He does get hit a lot, and yes, we can see that you can take a punch and you are capable of taking a lot of punishment. That is something that you shouldn't really go for. I mean, for example, it does wear off a bit. Looking at Max Holloway, for example, yes, it did take a while, but at the end of the day, you don't know when your time is going to happen for your chin to go. We all thought that Max could take all of Ilya's punches, and then Max got KO'd in that fight. So because of his reckless abandonment and how just he pushes forward, it does leave him open, so Joshua Van can have a puncher's chance to land on him. But knowing Joshua Van, he will capitalize on the right moment to time that shot, but keeping the distance and making sure that the pressure doesn't get to him is the right game plan for Joshua Van, and having great takedown defense so that he can't get submitted onto the floor. Now, that being said, Alexandre Pantoja's path to victory is also quite simple and effective. He has to stick to his bread and butter and do what he does well. That being making the fight dirty from the very beginning. By eliminating the standard and traditional ways a striker would engage in a fight, having normal movements, he has to make it unorthodox as he normally does, and constantly pressure Joshua Van when it comes to striking. He has to make it ugly, do unorthodox things, and latch onto him and cause immediate pressure to happen to Joshua Van, leading to a lot of chaos in the start of the fight. Now, another path that Alexandre Pantoja has to follow is implementing wrestling to make him a bigger threat. Now, what I mean by this is that implementing constant threats of takedowns makes Joshua Van slower on the feet when it comes to striking. It will have him constantly second guessing himself and worrying, is he going to attack me on the feet? Is he trying to clinch me, or is he just trying to take me down? What is it? What do I have to do? And that thinking gets him to slow himself down and make himself susceptible to different styles of attacks. Another path that Pantoja has to follow in this fight to secure himself the victory against Joshua Van is to make sure that there's a lot of scrambles. Pantoja does well in scrambles. It's a big advantage that he has over Joshua Van, and he's a pretty dominant person when it comes to scrambling. Now, the final thing that Alexandre Pantoja's got to do in this fight is utilize that cardio he has. He's a beast when it comes to cardio, and by turning this fight into a cardio war, it will allow him to improve his chances at beating Joshua Van, because we haven't seen Joshua Van fight this style of fighter, a very dominant grappler who's aggressive. It will allow us to see whether Joshua can handle it or not, and because he hasn't faced it before, his chances are quite slim to none, because we haven't seen him deal with this type of person before. There's clear edges about each fighter. We can see that Van has a lot of more better technique and clear boxing and speed, but however, we can see that Pantoja is more unpredictable, unorthodox, and has better power and constant pressure and dominance. This fight will allow us to see whether the young rising contender can take out the very dominant champion with his clean, crisp striking, or will we see age and experience play a factor, and whether his elite world-class jiu-jitsu will really affect Joshua Van, and because of his well-rounded experience, will he just absolutely dominate Joshua Van? But if I ultimately had to pick someone to win the fight, I am leaning towards more to Alexandre Pantoja, primarily due to his dominance, good chin, he has really dominant jiu-jitsu and a lot of aggressive pressure that I haven't seen Joshua Van deal with before. So I am going to lean more towards Alexandre Pantoja. Although I want Joshua Van to win, his chances are really slim because he has to face someone who is really great at what he does, and it's a really big step up for him. But let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Who you think is going to win the fight and who you're rooting for. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.